Okay, good day again. So, this is the part 2 of our lecture for radiographic anatomy. So, I hope this time you have already watched the first lecture so that you will be able to correlate it with the continuing discussion of this subject. So, before I proceed to the next topic, I would just like to go back dun sa isang slide na na-miss natin. If you have already watched the first lecture, the part 1, so you have noticed that I have skipped there one slide kasi na-forward siya. So, hindi ko na siya mabalik once the recording has started. So, I would just like to go back to that. So it is the four types of tissues. So this slide has already been shown and discussed dun sa first part natin. So the four types of tissues. So we have the connective, epithelial, muscle, and nervous tissues. So as shown on the picture, they also look like that under the microscope. And this next, ito yung na-miss natin. So these are the four types of tissues again, and they have the corresponding brief description. So for the connective tissue, so it is made up of cells, it's made up of cells that form the body's structure because they are called connective. So connective tissue, so they form form the body's structure because through these tissues, the different structures of the body are being connected from the word itself. So examples of these tissues are bone and cartilage. So you're already familiar with that the bones as well as the cartilage, so they are connected to each other, but there is just one bone in the body that is not connected to other bones. So lahat ng bones sa katawan natin, they are all interconnected except for that one bone. And do you know what that bone is? Okay, so for the benefit of everybody, that bone is called hyoid bone. So that is hyoid. So this is the only bone in the body. So only bone in the body that is not connected to other bones. Okay? So next is the epithelial tissue. So epithelial tissue is made up of cells also. Again, since they are all tissues, they are composed of several not several cells. Yes, they are composed of several cells of the same type. Okay, if you have watched the first lecture, I have already mentioned that. So the epithelial tissues, they line the inner and outer body surfaces, such as the skin. So from the word epithelial, so you have the epithelial layer of the skin as well as the lining of the digestive tract. So epithelial tissue also protects the body and its internal organs, also secretes or produces substances just like hormones, and also it absorbs substances just like nutrients. So the purpose of connective tissue is to form the body structure, while the epithelial tissue protects the body and also the internal organs, secrete substances just like hormones, and also absorb substances such as nutrients. So those are the four major functions of epithelial tissues. So protects, secretes, absorbs, tatlo lang pala, sorry. Protects, secretes, and absorbs. Next is the muscle tissue. These are made up of cells that have the unique ability to contract. So since they are made up of muscle tissues, so they are responsible for the contracting or it becomes shorter. So muscles also are attached to bones which enable the body to move. So usually our bones in the body have attached muscles that is able to make the bones move. And lastly, the nervous tissue. These are made up of neurons or the nerve cells. they carry electrical messages. So nervous tissue make up the brain. So they make up the brain as well as the nerves. And the nervous tissue connects the brain to all parts of the body. So lahat ng parts ng katawan natin, they are connected to the brain through this nervous tissue. So yan yung apat na types of tissues ng human body na na-skip ko nung part 1 ng lecture. Okay? So next we'll proceed to the next topic, which are the body cavities. So when we say cavities, so para siyang hollow structure. So just like, for example, we have the thoracic cavity. So the thoracic cavity is a hollow structure that houses the lungs and other thoracic components. So we will discuss the components of the body cavities. So again, we are talking of the human body. So a body cavity is a hollow space. Usually they are filled with fluids. So it is a fluid-filled space inside the body, again, that houses or holds as well as protects the internal organs. The two largest, so we have two largest human body cavities considered as the ventral and the dorsal cavity. So pag sinabi nating ventral, it is the frontal or the front part of the body. While pag sinabi nating dorsal, it is the back part of the body. Okay? Ventral is front and dorsal is back. These two body cavities are also subdivided into smaller body cavities. So generally, there are two types of body cavities. So two largest, the ventral and the dorsal body cavities. Okay, so next slide tayo. So again, pag sinabi nating ventral, so this is the ventral part or the frontal part. So as you can see, so these are the ventral part, and at the back we have the dorsal part. And also sinabi ko rin na these two largest cavities of the body, the ventral and the dorsal, are composed or divided or subdivided into smaller body cavities. So we have here sa ventral, we have thoracic cavities, abdominal cavities, and abdominopelvic cavity. And also, we have here the spinal cavity and pelvic cavity for the dorsal cavities. So, sa one of the videos that I will also present later, so na-embed ko na video, so may special discussion for the cranial cavity. So, you have to watch it also. So, for the ventral cavity, again, it is the anterior or front part of the trunk or the body. It contains the lungs, so protects, houses the lungs, the heart, the stomach, intestines, as well as the reproductive organs. So there are two ventral cavities as mentioned based on sa picture na pinakita ko a while ago. So we have thoracic and abdominopelvic cavity. So sa thoracic cavity, so it fills the chest or the thoracic part of the body. It is subdivided, so again, from ventral. So we have ventral, and then we have thoracic, and then we have pleural and pericardial. Okay? So pleural cavities, so from the word pleura or the lungs, it holds the lungs. Pericardial, peri is, sa medical term natin, peri is around. So cardial from the word heart. So it holds the heart because it surrounds or it is around the heart. For the abdominopelvic cavity, it fills the lower half of the trunk. So sa upper half is the thoracic cavity, and then sa lower half we have the abdominopelvic cavity, which again is still subdivided into the smaller cavities. We have the abdominal and the pelvic cavity. So abdominal, from a word abdomen, it holds the digestive organs as well as it includes the kidneys. For the pelvic, yung sa hips natin, it holds the reproductive organs as well as the organs for excretion, which includes the kidneys. So next is the dorsal cavity. So we have posterior, or the back part of the body as mentioned earlier. It includes, sorry ko lang ng E, includes both the head as well as the back part of the trunk. The dorsal cavity is also subdivided into cranial and spinal cavities. So cranial cavity, so from the word cranium, so cranium or skull, it fills most of the upper part of the skull, which also contains the brain. While for the spinal cavity, so it is very long, just like your spinal column, your spinal cord. Narrow, so maliit lang siya, just to fit in the spinal cord. Narrow cavity, which is inside the vertebral column. So you have vertebrae from your C1 up to the coccyx. It runs the length of the trunk and contains the spinal cord. So for the vertebral column, we have a cervical column, which is 7. And then we have the thoracic, which is 12. Then we have lumbar, which is 5. Sacrum, which is 1. And coccyx, which is also 1. So overall, we have 19, 20, 26. So we have 26 vertebrae, or vertebra, sorry. So the sacrum, when we are still younger, it is composed of about 3 to 5 bones. Then later in life, it fuses into 1. So isa na lang siya. And also the coccyx, it is composed of 5 bones sa mga bata, and then later when we become adults, so it fuses into 1 bone, which is the coccyx. The brain and the spinal cord are protected by the bones of the skull and the vertebrae of the spine. So, yun nga yung purpose ng ating cranial cavity and the spinal cavity. So, cranial cavity protects the brain, while the spinal cavity protects the spinal cord. Also, they are further protected by the meninges. So, after the cranial cavity, so we have meninges. So, first layer is the cranial cavity, and then the second layer for that are the meninges. This is a 3-layer membrane that encloses the brain and the spinal cord. So this is for further protection. So aside from the cavity, may meninges pa, which are 3-layer. And your assignment, again, so you have to include that in your first assignment, is to determine what are these 3 layers. Okay, that will be your assignment, and include that in your first assignment that I have given sa first part ng lecture natin. So, a thin layer of CSF, or the cerebrospinal fluid, is maintained between 2 of the meningeal layers. So, CSF, so laging lumalabas ito sa board exam. So, additional assignment, what produces and secretes the CSF? So, produces and secretes the CSF. So, that will be also your assignment, okay? What produces and secretes the CSF? So, CSF, so ang nakalagay dito is that CSF is produced by the brain. So, I am looking for that specific part of the brain that produces and secretes CSF. So, ilang years na siya, more than 4 to 5 years, lumalabas siya sa board exam. So, yung question is ganon. What produces or secretes the CSF? So, to continue, CSF provides extra protection and as well as cushion for the brain and spinal cord. Okay, so we have the cranial cavity, the spinal cavity, and the next layer are the meninges. So 3 layers siya. So inside this meninges, we have the CSF. So it is a cerebrospinal fluid, and it is found between the meningeal layers, and they also serve extra protection and cushioning for the brain and spinal cord, because as you already know, our brain and the spinal cord are two of the most sensitive parts of our body, and once they are damaged, so it will be difficult for them to heal. So usually nagiging brain dead na yung patient or lantang gulay, so they will not be able to move or paralyzed forever. So we have to protect them. Kaya marami siyang layers of protection. So another picture of your dorsal and vertebral cavity together with the organs protected inside. So the vertebral cavity, again, sabi ko kanina, is subdivided into thoracic and abdominopelvic cavities. So these are the contents. So the thoracic cavity and the abdominopelvic cavity is divided by, ito yung division niya, itong part na to. So this is what we call the diaphragm. Okay? So I have here again a video to further help you understand with what we are discussing. So here it is.
If you poke and prod at your abdomen, you might be tempted to think that your body is a solid mass of bone, muscle, organs, and tragically for some of us, fat. But it turns out that our bodies actually contain many important spaces or cavities. Some of these cavities, like for example the nasal cavity, open to the outside of the body. However, most of our cavities are internal. Body cavities have several important functions. Firstly, they protect delicate organs, like for example the brain, from bumps and shock when we walk, run and jump. Secondly, cavities allow internal organs to change shape and size. For example, our lungs, stomach and bladder can all expand and contract because they sit inside cavities. And lastly, body cavities provide a warm, nurturing space for foreign creatures to implant into, grow and burst from in the alien movies.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
The human body consists of two main cavities: the dorsal body cavity and the ventral body cavity. If you're not sure what the terms dorsal and ventral mean, check out my other video on anatomical terminology. Let's start with the dorsal body cavity. It can be divided into two parts: the cranial cavity and the spinal cavity. The cranial cavity is the space formed by the bones of the skull. It contains the brain. The spinal cavity, which is sometimes also called the vertebral canal, is a space formed by the bones of the vertebral column. The spinal cavity contains the spinal cord. Next is the ventral body cavity. It can be subdivided into two parts: the superior thoracic cavity and the inferior abdominopelvic cavity, which is separated by a flat muscular sheet called the diaphragm. The thoracic cavity can be subdivided into the left and right pleural cavities, and a central pericardial cavity. The pleural cavities contain the lungs, and the pericardial cavity contains the heart. Separating these three cavities is a partition called the mediastinum. The abdominopelvic cavity can be subdivided into a superior abdominal cavity and an inferior pelvic cavity. The abdominal cavity contains the stomach, liver, spleen, kidneys, small intestine, and most of the large intestine. The pelvic cavity contains the bladder and internal reproductive organs. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to my channel and stay tuned for more Human Biology Explained videos.
Okay, so that's it for the body cavity. So I hope you have you are already familiar with those body cavities. So next we will discuss with the architectural body planes. So these are very important terms that you should learn by heart starting now or starting today, because you will be able to need this during your radiographic positioning, and also when you become interns as well as professional rad techs later, so you will still be using these terms. Okay, so as a rad tech, so dapat alam natin to by heart. So first we will start with the anatomical body position. So when we say anatomical body position, it refers to the position of the anatomy or the body that refers to the position, sorry, it refers to the position of the body during during examinations in the hospitals. So ginagamit siya na term because for the reason para magkaintindihan, yan, para magkaintindihan yung mga healthcare professionals. So again, pag sinabi nating anatomical body position, alam natin kung ano yung position ng patient. Kumbaga, ito yung magiging baseline natin para maintindihan natin kung ano yung nire-refer nung kapwa radtech natin, nung nurse, nung doctor, na position ng patient. So, it is standardized, okay? Standardized position of the anatomy. So, the body is upright. So, as you can see, nakatayo yung tao sa picture, directly facing the observer, which is tayo yung observer. Feet flat and directed forward. So, naka-flat siya and directed forward also, facing the observer. The upper limbs are at the body side. So, sa gilid siya. Are at the body sides with the palms facing forward. So, yung palms naka-face din sa atin. So, also, the feet are slightly apart. So, do you know why the reason why the feet are slightly apart? Sige. So, that will be your assignment. So, another assignment natin. So, give me the reason o isulat nyo dun sa papel kasama ng mga previous assignments nyo, what is the reason why in the anatomical position, the feet must be slightly apart. Okay? Teka, hindi na siya So, bakit slightly apart ang feet ng patient? Bakit hindi siya pantay or bakit hindi pwedeng magkadikit? Okay? So, that will be your additional assignment. So, the radiographic planes and positions, ito yung start ng ating architectural planes. So, when we say body planes, so they are slices or imaginary lines or imaginary slices that slice through the body at a designated levels from all directions. So, there are four fundamental body planes which are commonly used dun sa field natin. So, we call it the coronal planes, the sagittal planes, as well as the transverse planes. Okay? So we have coronal, we have sagittal, we have transverse, and we have oblique planes. So actually, apat lang siya, but in my discussion later, so there is another plane that I have added. Pero ito yung pinaka-4. 4 basic or fundamental body planes. So we will start first with the coronal plane. So coronal plane is also termed as the frontal plane. So any plane that divides the body into anterior and posterior. So again, pag sinabi nating anterior, that is front or ventral. Posterior, that is back or dorsal. So, we have additional term for coronal plane. We have the mid-coronal and we have the mid-axillary. So, pareho rin yung definition ng mid-coronal sa coronal, except that may word na equal. So, pag sinabi natin coronal plane, it divides the body into front and back, or anterior or posterior. So, not necessarily equal division. Pero pag sinabi nating mid, pag may word na mid, it divides the body into equal anterior and posterior portions. Pag sinabi naman nating mid-axillary plane, it is a coronal plane that passes through the axilla or yung kilikili or armpit at the junction of the arm and and the arm of the body, wala na to. At the junction of the arm of the body when the arm is at 90 degrees of the body. So this means kapag na-raise natin yung arm natin at 90 degrees, kagaya rin ginagawa natin pag arm sidewards, raised to 90 degrees. So that's what we meant by 90 degrees raised. So erase muna natin para mas makita yung picture. So, ito yung coronal plane. So, ignore lang natin yung mid-sagittal plane. So, ito lang muna yung coronal plane. So, pag sinabing coronal plane, so this is the back portion. So, back, this is the front portion, or this is the posterior portion, or the anterior portion. So, pag coronal lang yung term, pwedeng dito siya nag-divide. So, this is the back, this is the front. Or pwede ding dito siya mag-divide, this is the back, this is the front. Pero pag sinabi nating mid-coronal, equal. So, ito siya. So, equal siya, equal ang parts, equal ang back, at saka front. Okay? So again, pag sinabing coronal, divides the body into anterior and posterior. Pag sinabing mid-coronal, equal. Equal division ng anterior and posterior. Okay? So para madali rin siyang tandaan, pag sinabing coronal, it means corona or crown. So nilalagay siya dito, hindi ba? So it divides the body into anterior and posterior portion. So, another one, erase muna natin ulit. Ka-erase lang natin para mas clear. So, pag sinabi naman nating mid-axillary plane, so eto siya. So, it intersects the armpit or the axilla. So, when the arm is raised at 90, actually hindi siya 90 eh. Kasi pag 90, dapat dito lang eh. Pag, diba, pag 90 degrees, dito lang siya diretso. So, anyway, basta naka-raise yung arms, and then ito yung mid-section or the middle section of the axilla. that is mid-axillary line. Still, it divides the body into front and back, or the anterior and the posterior. So this is the posterior axillary line and the anterior axillary line. Okay, so that is for the coronal, the mid-coronal, and the mid-axillary plane. So next is the mid-sagittal plane. So it divides naman the body into right and left portions. So for sagittal plane, it is also called the median plane. So, again, kung meron tayong coronal at mid-coronal, meron din tayong sagittal or mid-sagittal. So, you know the difference, right? So, yung sagittal divides the body into right and left. Pwedeng hindi siya equal, mas more sa right or mas more sa left. Pero pag sinabi nating mid-sagittal, so again, equal, okay? Equal division of the left and right portions of the body. So, just like this one, again, erase muna natin. So, here we have the red portion here. As you can see, the red portion is called the sagittal plane. It divides the body into right and left. And technically or specifically, this is what we call the parasagittal plane. Parasagittal, uneven or unequal division of the body into right and left. And yung sa yellow line naman, we call that the mid-sagittal plane. Okay? So, sagittal is divided into parasagittal and mid-sagittal. Parasagittal, if not equal, mid-sagittal if equal division of the right and left. So, number 3 is the transverse. So, transverse or horizontal plane. So, it divides the body into upper or superior. So, na-skip ko yung isang slide. Na-click ko siya, kaya picture yung lumabas agad. So, superior and inferior. So, superior or upper part and inferior or the lower part. So, kung meron tayong transverse or horizontal plane, meron din tayong mid-transverse. So, mid-transverse divides the body into, again, equal. So, equal, superior, and inferior part of the body. Parang paghati lang siya ng manananggal. And last, the number 4, for the 4 fundamental planes of the body, we have the oblique plane. So, any plane na hindi siya kasama sa coronal, hindi siya anterior and posterior, hindi rin siya sagittal, left and right, hindi rin siya transverse, superior and inferior. So, ang tawag dyan is oblique. So, imaginary line siya. It may be anywhere in the body and it is usually used sa MRI and also sa ultrasound. Pero ginagamit rin siya sa CT scan. Sa X-ray, ginagamit din. Pero most common siya sa MRI and ultrasound. So, ito siya. So, halimbawa, we have here this first line. So, hindi naman siya anterior, hindi naman siya posterior, hindi rin siya superior, inferior, left and right. So, yan yung oblique. Oblique means something is not parallel or something is not in the right angle. So, it is an easy way to remember is oblique. So, O for odd. Hindi siya 90 degrees. Hindi siya right angle. Again, oblique planes, a plane that is any type of angle other than horizontal. Di ba pag horizontal is this one? Sorry. Horizontal is this one and vertical is this one. So, pag hindi siya horizontal, pag hindi siya vertical, that is an oblique plane. So, So again, another picture just to show you the difference between sagittal, horizontal, and frontal. So sagittal, left and right, mid-sagittal, pag equal left and right, horizontal, superior and inferior. So pag frontal naman, anterior and posterior. And the last one that I have added here, which is also very important in our field, is the base plane. So this is the term used for imaginary line that divides the upper and lower portion of the skull. So, ewan ko anong nangyari dito. Upper and lower portion of the skull. So, basically, pag ginamit natin yung term na base plane, we are referring to an imaginary line that divides the skull. For skull lang siya alone. Okay? So just like this one, we have here the base plane. So it divides the skull into pwedeng superior and inferior. Or pwede rin siyang uh, anterior or posterior. So we have here the occlusal plane, occlusal for the mouth, here, occlusal. And then we have the base plane, so we have the division for the skull. So that's it for the last part of this lecture for today. So part 2 na siya. And I will continue to upload another video continuation of our lecture. Kasi yun nga sinasabi ko, hindi ko siya magawa ng mas mahaba kasi medyo matagal siya mag-convert into video and mag-upload sa YouTube. Okay, and also alam ko rin na yung attention span nyo is medyo maikli because of the uh, technicality of the terms. Okay, so until here for now, and again, please take note of those assignments that are needed to be submitted sa next meeting natin, and please also study and understand so that pag-meet natin sa next week, so we will have a quiz. And if you have questions or clarifications na medyo hindi clear sa inyo or hindi nyo mas maintindihan, you can chat me. So, and I will answer your inquiries dun sa chat box natin. Okay? So, thank you and good day.